Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Robby Rowland. Robby is a professional pitcher who is currently going into his 10th season of playing professional baseball. He has experienced the full spectrum in the game and has a passion to share his experience to help others. Robby, thanks so much for coming on to the show for today.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we've had a little chat now just offline there, and I can already tell this is going to be a fantastic interview. I mean, you're knowledgeable, you've got so much to share, and I think it's going to be cool for listeners just to get to listen to what is it like for a professional baseball player to have to maintain their body from when they start their career to where you are now too, and even beyond. So, and of course, the show has a lot of interest from a nutritional point of view, and a lot of listeners like the low carb, the keto, the carnivore way of eating, and that's how you're eating now. So before we get into why you're doing keto carnivore, I'd like to begin with what has your nutrition journey been like from when you started playing professional baseball to where you are?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for lying to the audience and saying that I was knowledgeable. I appreciate that. No, but honestly, man, like just to give you kind of a short summary of how it works was, I got drafted in 2010 at the age of 18. And I was the same height I am now, like 6'5", but back then I was like, buck 90 coming out of the pool with the tux on, like I'm just a skinny rail guy, long, lanky. And, at that point, I think I can relate to a lot of other individuals at that age that are active. You can pretty much just eat whatever you want. Right. And you can just burn, McDonald's for fuel, and you're not going to really notice anything. So my first year professionally, it was tough, man, because it's a totally different side of the spectrum as far as professional baseball than high school baseball, because in high school, you're obviously living with your parents and, they're cooking a lot of your meals and preparing a lot of things for you. Even like when you come home from school at lunch, there's something there for you. And then when you turn pro, a lot of the times, you're living out of a hotel. You don't really have that much time to prepare nutrient dense meals. A lot of the things are pretty much like on the go. So especially my first season, I didn't really know what to expect going in it. So a lot of the times, it was just pick something up quick from, a fast food restaurant, a sandwich spot, and then go to the field. And then that's a whole nother subject. The food at the field at that time, was a lower level minor league team. So it was like there was no budget. So you're getting PB&Js for lunch. You're getting, maybe some salami if on a good day, like a Friday. Just nothing really too like, I don't know, good for your body. You're really just relying on your natural athleticism to take over. And being young obviously helps with, waking up every morning and trying to feel good. But, and then a whole another side of that was after games, at that year, even 2010, 2011, we weren't getting fed post-game meals. So it was on us to go get food, and our game started at 7, so they're not ending until like 10 at night. You shower up, you kind of relax a little bit after the game in the clubhouse. You don't get out of there till probably like 11:30, even sometimes midnight, depending on what your exercise regimen looked like after the game. And so, I mean, as you can imagine, not a whole lot of places were open, around that time. So, I was in Missoula, Montana, of all places, my first 2 years professionally. And there was I don't know if you're familiar with like a Perkins diner, but it was kind of like a 24-hour thing, like a Denny's, and that was our spot. Every home game we'd go after there. And I'm 18, so I don't really know much. So it was like, oh yeah, a milkshake sounds good. Like I'll take down a milkshake every night, whatever. So yeah, man, I mean, that was kind of like the experience my first couple years was, and I got away with it, like genetically, I think I'm towards the top tier as far as athletic ability and body compensation. So, I wasn't seeing like drastic changes until I want to say like I turned like 21, 22 was actually when I really started diving into, okay, how can I really optimize my performance on the field? And I started looking at, the full spectrum as far as like, okay, I got to take care of my weight training. I got to take care of, proper sleep. I got to take care of, all of these other things. And then like nutrition kind of came in there. And it was like, okay, well, before I thought eating healthy was throwing some chicken wings in the oven and turning it to 350 and waiting 10 to 12 minutes. But that's when I started diving into, like, okay, if I do want to, increase my longevity as far as peak performance and peak athletic ability, then I need to start diving deeper into that. And then, I think every single year it kind of just increased. And then, even till now, I kind of, as you can see, like through my Instagram page and whatnot, I'm kind of obsessed with it.
Yeah. I mean, that it is fascinating to think that you turned professional, but nutritionally you were left in the dark there.
Very.
Yeah. It's, I think most people would say, wow, once they turn professional, then they're just taken care of. Everything's done for them in life. They've only got the best chefs in the world who are on the cusp of whatever nutrition has been found to enhance athletes at that stage. But it's not. It doesn't sound like that.
Well, it's funny, dude, because like I think a lot of people, and it's not anyone's in particular's fault. It's just they get a glimpse of what like Major League Baseball looks like on TV, and they get a glimpse of what the sports page says about a lot of major league athletes as far as the contracts and the salary negotiations, and they start getting an idea and a misinterpretation as far as like this almost different persona that a lot of these athletes take on, like and I think it's a totally different opposite side of the spectrum when you talk about like minor league baseball, because we're not, just to be completely open with you, like my first contract was like $1,100 a month. Obviously you know the side of the nutrition now, and there was just, it's really, and obviously it's getting a lot better if you are, keeping up to date with where things are heading towards minor league baseball now. It's getting better. There's more, I think, weight being put into the nutrition side of things nowadays. But yeah, man, like back then, and it's funny too, because my dad played for 10 years as well. And I mean, it was obviously a lot worse when he played, and it's drastically better when I played, but still I would determine it as bad too. So there's a lot of things that, a lot of people don't know when it comes to minor league baseball. And I think we're doing a better job. Obviously, social media shines a light on every single subject these days. So, it's definitely, I think, getting put out into the open now.
So is there a big difference then between the minors and the majors? Like if you went straight, I'm sorry, I'm going to be ignorant because I'm
totally fine. Yeah,
I'm not quite up to speed with all the different leagues when it comes to baseball, but
sure.
So is there quite a difference then if you get drafted straight into one of the major league baseball teams?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, man, because like baseball is one of the only like sports where, once you get drafted, like you still have a super long journey ahead of you to get to where, your goals are. Obviously, when you get drafted, a goal can be, I want to get drafted, but your major goal should be, I want to get to the big leagues, right? MLB, like with the people you see on TV, getting paid these contracts and living the dream essentially. And, there's such a difference between MILB compared to MLB. It's not like when you're, a football guy and you're drafted and like you have the ability to start opening night. Like you just don't see that in baseball. You have, to paint a picture for you, for me, I got drafted and I got sent to what was called rookie ball. And like you go rookie ball, and I'm going to paint a picture as far as the levels go. And there's rookie ball, there's advanced rookie ball, there's low A, there's high A, there's double A, there's triple A, and then there's big league. So you have, you're talking 6 to 7 levels of minor league baseball to go through. And then as you can imagine, just piggybacking off of that, like, think of all those players, right? Like think of the competition that you have to get to where you are, right? And not to mention like, me being a pitcher, like there's 12 pitchers on a major league team. So there's 12 pitchers out of, during the regular season, 25 guys. So you're trying to make, a roster spot, one of the 12 per 30 teams. And I'm no like math star, but I mean, you can put the percentages into your head as far as if there's 7 levels with 30 guys on those 7 levels. So you're talking about 200 to 300 guys per organization. And you're trying to, you're fighting for 12 spots on that big league team out of, say 150 to 200 guys per team. Like that's, wow. I just said a lot of numbers. Now I'm confused, but yeah, I mean, if you can just kind of get that image, as far as the competition, what that looks like and actually how hard it is. And just how special it is for those guys that are in the big leagues right now, playing every day and just doing it. Like it's, a lot goes into it behind the scenes that a lot of people, don't really understand. And again, it's no fault to them. But I think as we proceed in the social media age, things are going to get brought to light as far as like we sitting here talking about this podcast, talking on Instagram or whatever it is, like more and more people are going to start to see like really how hard it is to achieve those goals.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I always think same with golfers, the PGA Tour, and when people
it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's only very small percentage of people who can even handle that, that get to that level and make it even economically worthwhile, the struggle that everyone else goes through before they even hit that level.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like that's a whole nother thing too. And like, if you want to talk about getting to that level and then trying to stay at that level, right? And you talk about like pressure and you talk about the pressure of how to stay there, man. Like that's a whole nother side of the spectrum for golf too, right? Like you're on that tour and you're like, okay, I've busted my butt to freaking get to this position. Like, all right, don't look a fool, right? Like you gotta do everything in your power to block all that so-called pressure out and just be like, yo, like I belong here. I'm just going to try to relax. And it's funny, dude, because I'm sitting here like saying all this, like, wow, it sounds so easy to just do, but it's a totally different thing to be in that moment and try to say, try to say those words to yourself. But yeah, man, it's sports in general is just crazy, I think, in that regard.
So talking nutrition wise for a pitcher, because I would imagine a pitcher is a bit like a sprinter because you have to go from 0 to top speed in no time,
right?
And do it repetitively. So from an energy point of view, like what's it like? Like how long can you pitch for in a game?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, right? So you have the starting pitcher who's your guy that's going to start the game and go out and probably throw the most pitches. Today's day and age, it's probably like you're going to try to get 5 or 6 innings. And you're going to throw up to 100, 110 pitches, right? Obviously, back in the olden days, it was a lot different because they didn't really have like a bullpen relievers, and it was like the starter who started the game was going to go the whole time. But nowadays, it's definitely changed in that regard. And then once the starter goes to however long he can go, I think the average for this year, and like I said, it's changing throughout year to year because bullpens are getting so dominant, but an average pitcher is going to go out there and throw probably 5 to 6 innings on average, and that'll probably accumulate 100 and somewhat pitches, somewhere around there. And then you bring in your other guys, right? So you have your 6, 7, 8, 9 innings still left, and it's all varied upon who's coming in the game. So relievers typically probably throw like it's somewhere between they're going to face one batter to they're going to potentially face like the lineup once. So if you can paint that picture, it's there's 9 guys in a lineup and you're going to face all of those guys once, and sometimes that goes 1, 2, 3 innings. It's all variable, but you're right, man. Like 0 to 100, like that's the way pitching is. And I think if you want to take it like a step further, is like, how can we manipulate that in the training room, as far as being like stagnant to going full speed. And it's going to be a good segue between you and I feel it coming, as far as, how can we train and how can we put things into our body that are going to optimize very high power output numbers.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. So from there's multiple elements for you to be able to perform at that level. And we're just talking about one of the building blocks, which is what you're putting in your body through what you're eating. Yeah. And that's why so this is like a segue into the keto carnivore, where people look to go more ketogenic for sustained energy, to avoid those like yo-yo diet energy feelings.
Right.
Is that something that you found also through your nutrition journey and where you are now, that your energy levels are different because of this current way of eating?
Yeah, you know what, man, it's funny, and I'll try to be as brief as possible with this because it is kind of a somewhat long story. But the story behind how I started ketogenic was actually, I want to say like 18 months ago. So May of like 17, I actually ended up getting hit in the face with a comebacker. And I was going to miss a substantial amount of time. And it was a time in my career where, I wasn't like, I couldn't do anything. I came down with a concussion. I broke my face pretty much. And it was just like, I couldn't do anything. And I thought to myself, like, look, I've always gotten away with eating pretty unhealthy just because of how active I was in the active lifestyle that I had. And now I'm sitting here on the couch, like not being able to do anything. Like I got to change something up, man. So, long story short, it turned into like a intermittent fasting style of eating. And then obviously, as you know, and a lot of your listeners probably know, that the ketogenic way just kind of complements that very nicely. And I dove into it. And it was funny. So as I'm getting ready for my return that particular season, right around the July, early August stages, I'm trying to be fat adapted. Like I'm trying to get to that point where I'm starting to turn glucose off and start using fat for fuel. And as you know, man, it's kind of a tough adjustment. And I'm sitting here trying to do it like while pitching in games. And I specifically remember like just absolutely being exhausted by like the third or fourth inning. And again, like I'm a starting pitcher, so my responsibility is to go pretty deep into games. And I just remember like, being ketogenic, and it was probably like my third, maybe fourth week strictly keto. And I'm trying to start these games once a week, and I'm going out and like feeling really good, first couple innings, and then just hitting a wall. And I remember specifically having to go into the dugout a couple times in between, third or fourth inning, right around there, and like just shooting pre-workout, straight down and like getting something to boost me. And then, man, I tell you what, like my second or third, maybe fourth start being keto, I just remember like coming off the field in like the sixth or seventh inning after having thrown, upwards to 90 to 100 pitches, and just telling like, dude, it was a whole nother feeling of just, wow, I feel really good. And it wasn't just like, hey, I feel really good, like I've had success this particular game. It was like my energy level, like I could go, I could throw a whole nother game right now. And it was weird because I never really experienced that because, obviously during a game, your emotions are kind of like a roller coaster. You're having success, you're having failures throughout the course of a game. And, that weighs on you. And I just remember this game, I'm like walking off the field, manager says I'm done. And I'm just like, yo, like, let's go for a lift. Like, let's go for a run. Like, let's do something. Cause I was wired. And it was right around that same time that I really I didn't need as much sleep. Like I was waking up like super early, like going to the hotel gyms and working out. And it was just a whole different animal, man. And I know it's not like, everyone's kind of has that similar, kind of start to their journey. I think it's just a totally different light that you kind of get into.
So how old are you at the moment, Robby?
I like to tell people I'm 16. But apparently I'm 26 is what my birth certificate says.
But I think that's cool to know too, that again, as you said, when you were 18, we all feel that you can get away with things a lot more.
Right.
But and I know a lot of people when they hit that 30 mark and beyond, then they really notice the changes, like, oh wow, yeah, I've got like the purge, or my energy levels are completely different from when I was in my teen years or my 20s. But even here, you're finding there's still another level of energy that you're able to attain even whilst you're still in your 20s, which I think a lot of people will find fascinating.
Well, you know what, man, like, and I didn't really notice this either because, I mean, you know how fast time goes, especially if you're playing a game for a living, man. Like time, I remember going into my 2015 season. And I remember getting a moment where I was like, man, this is like, at the time, it was like my sixth season already. And I was like, it was a blink of an eye, man. Like things just happened so fast. And then I remember, obviously the here and now, like having, played 9 seasons going into my 10th, and, that takes a toll on your body, as much as I hate to admit it. And obviously I joke about feeling 18 years old, every day. Like, it's still like being a professional athlete, like you do things throughout the course of your day, in season, off season, it doesn't matter. Like you put your body through the ringer, if it's obviously the sport demands a high capacity for, training, like you have to be, in tip top shape. But for me, it's in almost every month, right? Like I'm not only playing, during the spring and the summers, but I also like to play during the winter. So I'm almost playing year round, and I mean, it takes a toll. So, I mean, I may be only 26. I know a lot of your listeners are like, man, like, he's 26, he should feel good, blah, blah, blah. But, if you put into account or take into account like what I've put my body through as far as training all a year around and playing this game almost all year around and the crappy bus rides to different states and the crappy hotel beds and the crappy food for the first 5 years of my career, like it all takes a toll, man. And that's something that I'm starting to come to a realization as I'm getting older and some would say more mature. I won't call it that, but I'm starting to realize that, it all matters, right? Like everything you do, how you do everything matters. And, it's no accident that the best of the best are the ones that really pay attention to what they're putting in their body. They're paying attention to, how they're sleeping, what they're sleeping on, what they're doing before their sleep, and that's how I've gotten so freaking obsessed with like the, quote unquote biohacking of things right now is because, it all matters. Everything you do in your day is a stepping stone to what you're going to become. Wow. I just thought of that quote, man. Write that down. That was freaking cool.
So I'm also interested then, were there any mentors or do you have anyone that sort of was a forerunner in the baseball field that showed you, hey, maybe this ketogenic way or this carnivore way is something that you need to explore?
I'm glad you said that, man, because this opens up a good shout out to my boy Brent Dean, who's actually was a teammate of mine at that specific time in 2017. That obviously was one of those guys that everyone kind of flocks to because he's, he takes his shirt off and you're like, gosh, dog it, like you can't help to admire it. But obviously, like a super fit dude, cared about his nutrition and his fitness and. I just remember like going up to him and being like, yo, like, what do you got, man? Cause I'm a very, I get very intrigued easily. And I just like picking people's brains. And I just remember having a sit down conversation with the guy and told him like, yo, I just, it was right around the time that I was dabbling with fasting. And he was like, yeah, I've been doing that for X amount of months. I also do this ketogenic thing. And I'm like, wait, what? And obviously you have that backstory, but it's so helpful to have a guy, especially in person. I know there's a lot of guys online that, will help you with your transition and that's great, but to have him in person and we would go on road trips, and it was like, obviously you stop at a mall or something to go eat and it's like, I don't know what to do. So like, I'll follow him and, he showed me kind of the ropes in the very beginning stages and kind of what he did to really prepare. And definitely, I can't thank him enough for what he, showed me in those early stages.
So that's a great point too there about traveling to eat keto to maintain your energy levels at that stage. What's the tip that you can give to listeners there?
Man. Oh, this is going to be great. So a lot of people think I'm going to be crazy for this. So if you go, shameless plug, but if you go on my YouTube, just type in Robby Rowland and I think something will come up. And if you go to my early YouTube videos, I started documenting like what it actually took to stay ketogenic, like on road trips. So we would usually have like an off day or maybe a day game before we would embark on a pretty decent road trip. And that's, probably like a 12, 15-hour bus ride accompanied by, 7 nights in a hotel, right? So I try to do my part and go to the grocery store and just start pretty much meal prepping, man, for that upcoming road trip. I knew that I would be fasting those days, so I wouldn't really have to worry about a breakfast. So, I would pack a lunch, pack something for dinner, obviously, but then I'd try to pack like another meal that I could eat somewhere, during the game or something. And yeah, man, like I remember at the time thinking like, is it even worth it, dude? Because this is like a lot of work. But it was cool, man. I think like YouTubing it, documenting it gave me like a different type of angle to make me want to do it. So, it was obviously a lot of work got put into it. So I remember buying this huge ice chest and, doing my meal prep, which consisted of obviously like the staples, right? Like chicken thighs, some ribeyes, some New York strips. And again, like obviously I'm on a budget, so I'm going to, all these stores and trying to find the best of the best deals. And then I'd have my nuts. I had obviously a bunch of eggs and bacon. And again, it's like very simplistic things that I'm cooking and I'm just throwing in that. And obviously I'll go into another detail here in a bit, but, just and then I'd pick out one recipe per road trip. This is funny. I'd pick out one recipe per road trip that I wanted to get like fancy on. So if it was like zucchini spiraled noodles or like macro friendly pancakes or whatever it was, like I'd try to get fancy and like cook this whole thing and put it. And then the details were I'd have to call the hotel in advance where we were going. I'd have to call them in advance and be like, hey, I don't want to be picky or anything, but I just want to double check that you guys will have a microwave and a fridge in whatever room that I'm in, because apparently I didn't know, but like hotels, they have to like offer that. So I'd be the guy that was like, yo, I'm Robby. I'm going to be this guy. I apologize, but I need a hotel, or I need a fridge and a microwave. And then I'd, pack up ice and put all that in Tupperware. And I hate to say it, but it was all plastic Tupperware, and I'd put that in my ice chest and throw it somewhere on a bus, man. And once we got to the hotel, I'd strap that on along with my luggage, get to the room, take all that out, put it in the fridge, and then, the rest is history. But that's kind of again, it all goes into it, right? Like, if you want to feel great every morning, if you want to do the things that you need to do to stay optimal, I mean, that was one of the things for me. I think that kind of helped me stay motivated and stayed on top of my diet, was holding me accountable.
And did you eat enough protein? I mean, I can imagine you need to eat a lot.
So I was obviously, again, we talked about it before the show started, but very experimental guy, so I'd experiment. And it's funny, I hear it a lot. Like when people start keto, they're so obsessed with like the tracking thing, and that couldn't be more to a T, man. Like I was tracking everything, and I was tracking my fasted hours. Like I was obsessed with this stuff. It's kind of funny to think about now. But I was experimenting with, 1-1 ratio as far as protein fats. I was experimenting like almost with a 2-1. Obviously I think my money point was a 1-1. I'd say, this is going to sound crazy, but like proteins, fats around 300 grams each. I'm crushing, 8 to 10,000 calories a day. Yeah, obviously the carbs I was very lenient on the carbohydrates, just because I was burning through glucose. As you can imagine, in the Midwest during the summers, you're outside, man. You're burning through everything. I'm even today, like I have a very high metabolic rate, just resting. So it's like, again, you got to like kind of understand these things, going into it, and experiment with what you have to do to feel your best, to feel optimal. And that was kind of something that I really enjoyed and still enjoy, was experimenting with what, with what made me feel which way, and writing all that down and tracking that.
Yeah. And talking about calories there, I mean, some people think, wow, you get to, get away with eating that many calories. Did you notice any change in your weight at all?
I lost weight, dude. I lost a lot of weight, honestly. And I lost a ton of body fat. And it's funny, dude, because everyone was kind of getting mad at me. And it wasn't even like something like, and when I say that, I mean like teammates around me that can obviously see the transformation. And it wasn't even something that I seeked out for. Like I was just doing it because I was feeling really good, like cognitively, man. I struggle with ADHD, and it was something that I could really focus. Each and every inning when I was out there pitching, like I could focus, and I felt more just cognitively enhanced, and I was able to just hone in on certain things that I wanted to do on the mound. And it wasn't even like, hey, I'm a fat guy, I need to lose weight. Like I was never really quote unquote fat or overweight or obese or whatever you want to call it. It was, but as I started doing it, and I'm just, dude, I kid you not, man, you should have saw some of these meals I was taking down. But it was like, I mean, it's no accident, 8 to 10,000 calories. That's a lot of food. So, and I'm losing weight. So everyone around me is kind of like, what is happening, man? Like, what are you doing? So yeah, man, I mean, I don't even remember what you just asked me, but I remember specifically, like, just that was kind of a result as far as, some of the excess body fat that my body actually didn't really need was just, shedding off. And I mean, obviously you don't really mind it, but again, as a professional athlete, I think you do kind of need some of that fat, especially throughout a course of a full season.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked earlier about energy levels. I mean, we're talking where it's how do you sustain energy levels for all those months of the season, but even the energy levels within so many hours that the game itself plays, and doing that time and time again. Um, and as you'll need a lot of muscle power to do that explosive movement. So I could just imagine you have to bulk up in certain places, and you'll need that protein to sustain that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You couldn't have been more spot on with that. I think that's something. Again, it's something that I struggled with in the beginning stages of my journey with keto. Was I'm seeing like this weight loss. I'm seeing this body fat drop percentage drop, and I'm feeling good. But at the same time, my power output numbers, I would say, were down. So how do I, you asked like, how do I track that, right? So it's obviously ball speed, like velocity. Ball velocity is like a big key indicator within that specific number. So, I had a little brief velocity drop, and then everyone's like, why are you eating this way? You need carbohydrates, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'll check it out. I'll see what's going on, because again, it's tough because you're sitting. For me, in my journey, I was sitting there, and I'm thinking like, okay, I feel really good, and we can talk about this later in the show. But I was recovering very well. Like, obviously, you're not as inflamed when you're not on carbs, so I was recovering really well, and I think that's a big staple within why I love the diet so much. And it was like, okay, what do I have to sacrifice here? What do I kind of pick and choose as far as how I want to proceed with this diet? And again, like, I'm very experimental. So, and then I think with what really helped me within my journey on how to get the most out of me was I started supplementing some like exogenous ketones before I would start. And I think that kind of just really helped ignite that quick burn, during my starts. And I was able to get right back to where I was, if not even a little bit more.
So talking about exogenous ketones, sorry, Robby, do you still take them, or do you take them before you play a match or during you play a match?
Yeah, I mean, I dabble. So I think, again, like it's funny. So I did some research on those, because with anything, I hate to say it, but like, I get pretty suspicious with supplementation. So it's like, okay, what is this doing to my body? Yeah, obviously I feel good, but like, what in the long run is this going to do? Right. So I think some stuff came out about the more that you take like exogenous ketones, like the less your body will produce them naturally. So that obviously right from the get-go kind of made me like a little suspicious, made me not want to take them as much. So I'll supplement them still. Like, there's a couple companies that I work with actually that produce some really good exogenous ketones. I won't do any shameless plugging here, but I still do them, like, say, for like a pre-workout jolt, or even if like I need to do some podcasting and I'm not feeling that great that day, like I'll take them. And but I've gotten to the point, I think what the main thing was I think it just helped me along my fat adaptation phase. It just kind of helped me get into that a little bit quicker, so to speak. But if I were to have a game today, like, I don't think I would have to necessarily rely on those things, to fully get the most out of myself.
I'm just thinking for any listeners here who are thinking, hey, cool, I want to be a pro baller, and but I need to go through this transition. Is that a tip then you would give to someone, saying if you notice, as you said, your ball speed was dropping or your power output's dropping, that maybe that's a sign that you need to just take some supplemental exogenous ketones to get through that stage? I
would say definitely some supplements, right? So again, it really helps me to have a mentor in that regard, because he was obviously adamant about the potassium, magnesium, pink salt on everything, like making sure that, because that's usually the problem, right? Like, a lot of people go to this diet and they're like, okay, I'm going to strictly cut out carbs, right? And they don't really realize what that's doing to their body as far as retaining water and staying hydrated. And as you can imagine, being a professional athlete, like, that's the major thing you need to worry about, man, is like being hydrated. So I had the leg up. I was supplementing potassium, magnesium, putting pink salt, even just shooting pink salt, like a fourth of a teaspoon at times. And I think that really helps. I would always advise someone to do that. And it's funny, like as I've gone through this journey, like I get a lot of, people on my Instagram. I've developed a nice little following over the years, and I get a lot of people like, high school athletes being like, yo, like you're having a lot of success on this diet. Like, I'm going to try it. What do you got? Like, that's the first thing I'll say. Like, okay, if you want to be serious about this, make sure you're supplementing these XXX, blah, blah, blah. And another thing that helps, I don't think it's a secret, is be active. Obviously you're going to have those days where you're feeling absolute crap, but again, like, I think it's a temporary thing if you do the right things, and it can only last as long as you make it last. And when it comes down to it, like push comes to shove, and you need that extra, giddy up, I would always recommend like exogenous ketones, and make sure you message me to get the exact products that I use. So, but it's true, man. Like I think it just puts you over. It just gives you kind of a boost in that regard as far as energy levels. Definitely something that I used and have success with it. But again, like me and my characteristic traits, like I never want to rely on something to, to succeed at something. Right.
Yeah. So, and so, because that's what was going to be one of my other questions. I mean, you found this way of eating now at this stage, but as you said, you've got youngsters who, as you were, they had to start at high school to then try and get drafted in. Do you think this is something that could be optimal for them to begin with to make their careers more sustainable?
I do, man. I like I said, I don't think I'll ever, I don't think I will ever tell someone not to do keto. The only time that I think I've stopped someone from doing it is when people come up to me during their season and they say like, hey, I'm thinking about making the switch. What do you think? And I think the risk reward is just too great there. Because again, you're talking about kids that are, trying to get scholarships, trying to get drafted, whatever the case may be. And then they're talking about totally changing their fuel source mid-season. It's just not smart, right? If you look at big picture, and it's funny, like I had Danny Vega on one of my podcasts, obviously, keto counterculture, and like one of the leaders in like keto and fitness. And he kind of says the same thing. And that's something that we agree on, is like, you have to be smart about when you're essentially going through that adaptation. And for me, like, obviously I did it during season and it wasn't the smartest thing. I think a couple of my starts like suffered from that. But if you're smart about the timing of it, you can definitely do it like out of season, when you're not called to compete. Because baseball players, not a lot of the ones in high school like won't play year round. So if you can pick out like, hey, I got a month a month to maybe 2 months here of, I'm not competing, I'm just going to be practicing and training, like, go ahead, man, do it. Because I will always recommend it for the benefits of the anti-inflammatory properties. I will always recommend it for the cognitive benefits. And then I like to say this too, with people that don't really understand it, is it's a constant practice of willpower for me. And obviously, like when you can practice your willpower each and every day, that's going to breed into other areas of your life. And and again, like I think when it comes to like the nutrition side of things, for me, that bred over to like the biohacking side of things, and that bred to more like seeking out like longevity, seeking out optimal health. Like it's just almost an obsession. I think it all stemmed for me from just going straight into the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and I can imagine that. I mean, that's something we haven't even touched on, is the whole psychology involved in sports itself too. And I'm just thinking about that. Yeah, when as an athlete, where maybe you have the ups and downs of the season, but suddenly you try something, you go, whoa, I feel different, and it's actually making me feel better. But you've got that pressure to go, I've got the willpower to sustain this, because the temptation, I guess, from others around you eating a certain way, getting sponsors to give you and say, hey, just eat all these funky things for us. And you're like, no, I need to stay the course. And but as you said, that inspires you, and I can only imagine what that does for you psychologically.
Yeah, you know what? Anthony J, actually, I had him on my podcast, and I'm going to go shameless plug for your listeners. You can check my podcast out at The Robby Row Show. But I had Anthony J on my show, man, and he said something that I'll always remember as far as the ketogenic diet or anything, that science says. And I quote him when he said, trust the science and then like worry about the other stuff later. And that's so true, right? Because if the data is showing us positive benefit, then just trust that. And obviously you can talk about like how much placebo effect has on one's, mental performance. But if you're going to sit there and like, you're going to say like, oh, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. I don't feel good. You're changing fuel sources, man. Like it's not something like any other yo-yo diet that's going to happen overnight. Right? Like it's funny when I get kids that actually do it and they're on like their 3rd or 5th day of keto and they go, dude, I feel great. Then I'm like, you're probably doing something wrong, man. Like you might need to look at like what you're actually consuming. But it's true, man. Like trust the science, right? And if you're on the the I know there's a lot of people that are kind of hesitant to do it because this whole quote unquote keto flu is out there and everyone's kind of scared of that. I just encourage them to do more research into the benefits of keto. Like I don't think people. And again, it's fine to be kind of like that as a person to where you look at the immediate disadvantages, but accompany that with like the advantages too. Again, we talk about like risk reward and weighing the possible outcomes. For me, it was like the reward farly outweighed the risk in that regard.
And is one of your tips now for athletes or just anyone, I guess, more the protein side? So this like takes me more into the carnivore, like the keto carnivore side. And I've seen your pictures too, where when you're traveling and you've got all the burger patties with the cheese. So sort of that way of keto versus just trying to bucket load lots of butter and MCT oil in one end. It's actually you'd prefer to have the natural saturated fats from the animal sources plus get to eat all this meat.
Yeah, again, and again, I go back to my experimentation side of my overall being is I've experimented with the guy being like going to Starbucks and getting all the to-go Kerrygold butters, and like carrying those around and then putting those on everything and carrying some, and I'll still do that, right? Like if I'm traveling, I know I'm going to be in an airport all day. Like I'll obviously have some MCT to go things, some pink salt to go things. And there's things that I still will supplement. But as far as like, I always try to get like the main bulk of my nutrients from like whole dense like protein. So that's why you see like the burger patties, and that's why you see the freaking 3 pounds of steak per sitting. Like I think there's no substitute for just quality good like red meat, man. And again, it goes back to what is going to make you feel optimal, right? And I've kind of learned throughout the last a year and a half that when I feel my best is when I'm consuming high amounts of protein, usually between like 200 to 250 grams, and my fat is pretty much right around there. And I know that I can wake up every single day like feeling good and feeling ready to attack the day, whatever that day holds. Again, and I'm still like super experimental, so some days, obviously my non-fasting days, but like I'll still go around and play with, really high copious amounts of fats and then moderate amounts of protein like the strict keto people will do. And, I just don't feel as good. And I don't know if that's to say that, I'm not maybe adapted to that, and that's totally fine. Like I agree. Maybe I am not. But again, like, I think as an athlete, like you need that quality source of protein, and don't be scared of protein. I think it's more and more research is coming out about the whole gluconeogenesis thing and everyone being so scared of that. And I think there's a lot of people doing phenomenal jobs at kind of debunking that. Right. And I don't want to say like I'm one of those guys, but I can still pull like a 2 to 2.5 millimole ketone reading after a total of maybe 5 to 6 pounds of steak the previous day. So obviously it's not like affecting my ketone levels. I don't know how much weight you would put in that meter, but it's just kind of something to determine.
Yeah. And have you had any lapses on your journey too? So I can imagine, there's, as you said, a little bit with the psychology of being able to maintain this way of eating, but have you had any experiences where maybe you had to have a social event or something where you went, okay, I'll have a bit more bread or a bit more carbs of some sort, and then you realize like, dang, that that's influenced me. Like the next day you can see, oh dear, all right, this is not great.
Yeah. Short answer, yes. So it's funny, man, because I will say, like, this diet, it complements my personality very well. Like I'm someone that doesn't really care what people think about them. Kind of walk to the beat of my own drum. So when I am the guy in a restaurant, like ordering, hey, can I get 6 beef patties? Like nothing else. I'm totally fine with that. Like I'm fine with being weird, and I'm maybe a little bit obnoxious for the restaurant. And it's fine because, again, how bad do you want to feel good, right? Like how bad do you want to chase optimal performance? Obviously that goes back to understanding what that looks like as far as for your personal being. But again, short answer, yes, man. Like there's been some occasions I remember specifically being like with my team, like celebrating, right? And then alcohol's involved, and I don't like drink or anything, but it was like, yeah, I guess I'll have like one drink, to celebrate for a big win or something, whatever it is. And I mean, that goes into the equation. Or I remember I was in Mexico playing winter ball, and like we were in like the World Series of all like Caribbean series teams. And we went to this steakhouse place, dude. And I'm talking like I crushed in a sitting, like close to 4 pounds of ribeye. And then they're like, hey, you guys want dessert? And I'm like, oh boy, like what's your dessert, man? Like they come out with these big old cakes, dude. And I'm like, yeah, I'll have a cake. Yeah, sure. So I crushed a cake. But it's funny, just kind of piggybacking on that side of things is like I'm in the process of like a 8 to 12 week bulk right now, or attempting one. And I've learned that I just, and this is no disrespect to like the ketogenic community and the individuals who say that you can bulk on keto. I just have not had success with it. So I'm in like a cyclical type of ketogenic bulk right now. It's funny because you kind of weigh the pros and cons, right? I absolutely love being in a nutritional state of ketosis just because, I can sit on here and I can talk for an hour to 2 hours on a podcast without, freaking out that I haven't moved in the X amount of time, right? But I know that like the way that I feel when I'm out of keto, dude, like again, going back to like my ADHD problems, like I can't do it. So again, it's, it's kind of trying to set yourself up for some success there. But, just touching briefly on my like cyclical bulk is like I've had a little bit more leeway, I guess you would say, on like my cyclical days as far as my carbohydrates go and whatnot, and what I can eat on those days. But I definitely feel like that next day or whatever, I'll be like, man, I got to get back into it. But yeah, I don't know if I answered that question, but there you go.
Yeah, you did. I mean, it's no, the way I wanted to sort of just lay it out is that, yeah, no one's perfect. And so we always experiment of maybe having more carbs, and for essence, if you're keto, but it's always fascinating then to go, I don't know if cutting out the carbs made a big difference, but then when you go back to carbs, you might go, oh man, I feel so grotty, or I'm cramping, or my sleep, or something's changed again.
It was sleep for me. Yeah, it was definitely sleep for me, man. Like that was the first thing I noticed was, I don't know if this will sound weird or not, but when I'm keto again, like I don't need like 8 hours to 10 hours of sleep at night. Like I'm getting 4 to 5 and I'm waking up, man, and I'm feeling really good and I'm ready to attack. And then I noticed like on some of the days where I am higher in carbs, I'm like groggy in the morning, like I'm grinding to get to the coffee maker. And it's just like, again, like, is that an optimal way to live, And I don't know. But again, I think everyone's different in their journey, right? And I will say, just to make sure we do touch on this, is I would always encourage someone to be pretty dang strict in the early stages of their keto adaptation, because being fat adapted pays off in the long run. So if you can be strict, if you can be strict for 6 to 8 months, and I know that's asking a lot, but I promise you, like, it'll pay off. And that's kind of the way I approached it. Like, I think I was pretty dang strict. Like, I think my first year of keto, like I didn't really have any cheat days. Like I didn't do any cyclical stuff. I was strictly keto, and I got fat adapted pretty quick. And I've learned through my cyclical bulk that once you're fat adapted, man, your body is very adaptable to getting back into that nutritional state of ketosis pretty dang quickly. And it's a very cool thing, because you can have those cheat days, and I'm not encouraging anyone to have those cheat days. But again, everyone goes on vacation, right? Like everyone has the weekend getaways, and you don't want to sacrifice your your life, for a diet. And maybe some people do, and that's great. If you can stay keto like all the time, that's great. It's nothing harm. But again, psychologically, I will say, like, it's okay, to have those weekend getaways and crush a pizza that's not cauliflower crust or whatever. But again, like, going back to the fat adaptation and the importance of that is for me, it's huge, because it's crazy to see what my body's doing for me right now, man. With this cyclical bulk is, I can go 200 to 300 grams of carbs one day, and I can pretty much be back into ketosis like the next night, and that's pretty dang fascinating. So,
yeah, and I just want to also ask about circadian biology, so like body clock stuff. Right in the beginning, you were talking about how, and I've always found that fascinating watching a professional game, and guys are trying to perform at top level at 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
mm-hmm.
And as you said, then, people need to eat afterwards or during, and from a body clock point of view, that's just knocking your circadian rhythm way out. How do you handle that?
Totally. Yeah, totally off. And that's something that I've become obsessed with in this past year, is like the optimizing circadian rhythm to obviously your performance, but it's tough to do when you play a sport that the game starts when it's nighttime. But something that I did to help was I tried to, the best of my ability, kind of just adjust that clock within my personal being. And what I mean by that is just kind of getting it going a little bit later and just trying to adjust that. Again, I think the body is very adaptable into that circumstance, as far as if you demand it to be at your top peak performance at a certain time over and over again, I think it's going to adjust to that. But something that I started doing this past year that I never saw myself doing ever, because previous years I was a big like sleep in, night out guy. I started waking up right when the sun would come up. And again, it goes back to not needing so much sleep. But at first I started setting the alarm, 6:30, 8 o'clock. And again, I'm going to bed at like midnight, but started setting the alarm, and then shoot, man, like that second week that I started doing that, like I was up, I was up right when the sun would come up, and right when I'd wake up, again, we can talk about biohacking, but right when I'd wake up, 16 ounces of water, get up, and those first steps, like go outside and take your shoes, socks off. Well, I don't know who wears shoes and socks when they sleep, but just walk up and go. And I had a nice little patch of grass, man, and I just walk on the grass for like 10 minutes. And I think, I know it's going to sound like hippie-ish and crazy, but like that just started the day like really good, and talk about circadian rhythm, like the way we were made to really start a day. And it's funny because like people were like, because I was tracking everything, I had a Fitbit and I was tracking the amount of sleep, the quality of sleep, and I posted on my Instagram stuff, and people were like, "You're an idiot! Like, you're crazy! You need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. You're a professional athlete." Blah blah blah. But man, I never felt better, when I was getting that 4 to 5 hours of sleep, but starting my days off like that. And it was like I didn't need a nap anymore, right? Like, whereas before, even if I was sleeping 8 to 10 hours a night, I would still try to sneak away during the day and take like an hour nap. And I wasn't needing that, and even throughout the course of the game, like I was, again, going back to the, being locked in and mentally focused, I was locked in, man. I was locked in all day. And I think, it all kind of was a culmination of everything that I was doing to set myself up for success.
Mm. And do you find that you skip breakfast or you have breakfast?
Well, again, like for me, it varies, because sometimes my last meal is probably going to be around like 11. The days that I really set myself up for success were the days where I would eat before the game. So 6:30, and then I wouldn't eat again. I try to like hit a 16-8 method, but then I really started having some success when I didn't do like an IF style of living every single day. I would do it like almost every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I started like noticing that my body was like, people talk about like confusing your body, confusing your metabolism. And that was something I actually really did like. But obviously it's tough, again, that's one of the tougher things when you sleep 4 to 5 hours a night is you're going to be hungry, kind of, the second or third hour you're awake. But I did a lot of experimentation with like some fat fasting. So like I'd wake up and I do probably like gallon of water before I had my first coffee. But when I had my first coffee, it was like, MCTs, coconut oil, like a splash of heavy cream and some butter. And, I'd be okay. I think I'd be okay after that until like another hour or two. And then by that time, when I did eat, it was like, I was approaching my window. So it was good. But again, like, it's funny because that's a pretty high debatable topic when it comes to professional sports, is like, there's no reason you should be intermittent fasting. And it's like, okay, well, I disagree with that.
And I think that tip you mentioned there, before a game, so maybe 1 or 2 hours before you're about to start pitching, that you have one of those nice big meaty meals just to get the energy into your body. And then once your metabolism after 2 hours is sort of digested, and then you're just in that good state, hopefully for the game, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it varies again, right? So the days that I pitch, I'm making sure, because the days that I pitch, man, I'm burning a very high amount of calories and energy, and those are the days where, like, I won't even consider fasting or worry about fasting that night. So, again, I'll eat before the game, I'll pitch, I'll eat after the game, I'll wake up that next morning, I'll get a big meal in, I'll have some coffee, and then throughout that whole day, like, I'm making sure that I'm replenishing my body with proper nutrients that it needs. And then maybe that next day, or that next night, knowing I'm not going to pitch that night, not going to play that night, I'll start my fasting window probably around like 5 or 6, and then set myself up for a little bit of more success going past that.
I want to ask about something completely random, but chewing gum. Because whenever I watch baseball, the guys are always chewing, like tobacco or gum, I guess, nowadays. But, and I know it's, in one way, it's because of nerves. It's tense and there's pressure, and so chewing something probably relieves that psychological pressure, which is why people are doing it. But I've also, that stimulates your nervous system. You're chewing. I wonder, does it make you, more hungry? Do guys have to snack more? And how have you dealt with that?
That's funny, man. That's a good topic. I never even touched on this. I haven't chewed gum since I've been keto. That's weird. I didn't even think about that. I haven't chewed gum since being keto. I do seeds. I do seeds, strictly macro-friendly seeds. The salt intake is actually fairly keto-friendly on those. Sometimes you got to carefully watch for the added, flavors. They'll sneak some sugar in there for you. But I'll do seeds. When I pitch, I don't chew anything. I don't think. I don't really have anything going on. No, but I do understand what you're saying as far as like the central nervous system and kind of countering that with something. But I've learned that being keto, going back to the whole focus thing, is I don't think I need to rely on something like that magnitude. Like I mean, I'm pretty much good when it comes to being able to hone in and focus on the task at hand and not really needing anything. But if I'm just chilling in the dugout, knowing that I'm not pitching, like, yeah, I'll throw some seeds in, and more of a way just to have something, right, to like kill the time a little bit more efficiently. That's a really good point, dude. I'm actually going to like write a blog or something on that. So thanks for that.
Yeah, well, I as a consumer of the sport, just visually, you always see the guys chewing something. So I can imagine it's there in the dugouts. It must be a habit that as guys come out, they've had that adrenaline pump and now they've just got to sit there and watch, and it's tense, and you are we going to get a run here? So people just grab, I guess, there must be a bowl, and they chew, and then it just becomes a habit.
Yeah, you're right. Like that's so true though, because we have barrels and barrels of gum in the dugout and seeds and all that stuff, and I think it's more of just not a have to have it, just it's there, so I'll have it. Right? It's like when you're bored at home and you have all this food in the fridge, like you're going to probably eat. But it's funny because I remember when I was in high school and I was an infielder, I struggled, again, going back to like my ADHD. It was like I struggled sitting there not doing anything, not having the ball. So I remember like my dad was like, hey, like chew a big pack of gum, like just have something, right, that's like kind of occupying your focus.
Yeah. That's why I said it was a bit of a sidetrack, but I did think it would also, from a keto point of view, it would be interesting because gum typically is full of sugars, to keep you entertained. So you're not needing to go with that, or even that peer pressure amongst everyone else. They're chewing around you, but you don't need to chew anymore. And you might stick out like a sore thumb. They're like, why is Robbie not chewing anymore?
Yeah, even with the Gatorade too. It's funny. We have guys like trainers and whatnot, like will fill up Gatorade things for us when we're pitching and bring it to us wherever we're sitting in the dugout. And like, I had to specifically tell my guy, like, hey, I'm not gonna, I don't need the Gatorade. Just bring me water. And it's funny, like I'll even pack around like a gallon of water, like one of those gallon jugs, people bring around and whatnot. And I'll fill mine like with a 4th cup of pink salt and shake it up and just bring that around with me on the days that I pitch.
Yeah. So we've been talking for a good hour now, and I think we've covered a lot of great topics. I mean, so many actionable things. And what I love about the things that you shared today, Robbie, aspiring young athletes will be getting so many topics out of this that they could start implementing themselves today, so that they don't have to wait 10 years and then go, oh, maybe I should have tried this. And even guys now who are potentially midway to near end of career, and they need that recovery factor even more. You're giving them actionable tips again that they could start implementing today, which is what I loved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you've given us insight into the world of baseball, which I think a lot of fans of baseball are also, again, going to love hearing, like, oh, is that what it's really like?
It's not all glamorous that people think.
Cool. Well, for anyone interested in following you, keeping up to date with you, you've dropped earlier the podcast, but this is a time to say it again. What are the sort of social platforms or places that you'd like people to keep in contact with you?
Oh, well, unfortunately, you can pretty much find me anywhere. I'm very active on social media. I love keeping up with people that are looking for tips or just fans in general. Like, it's so much fun for me. But on Instagram, you can find me. Robby Row12 is my username. It's Robbie with a Y. Twitter, Robby Row _12. I'm not as active as I used to be on Twitter now that Instagram's kind of taken over the world. But Facebook, obviously, just my name, Robby Rowland. Again, YouTube is something that you can go back. I'm not as super active on YouTube, but I dabble with like some vlogging stuff whenever I have time. And you just type in Robby Rowland. I think that's my username, actually. It's Robby Rowland. But if you want a pretty funny kick, you can go to that YouTube and then go to like my first few videos. Like I said earlier in the show, was I started documenting like my grocery hauls, and I started documenting like things that I needed to do to stay on track. And I go back and look at those sometimes, and it's like, wow, I'm such a nerd. But podcast, that's where I'm probably most active, and you can hear my beautiful voice on that anytime you want. The Robby Row Show, again, Robbie with a Y. It's available on Apple Podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and I think that's it.
Cool, man. Well, for any listeners, I'm going to put all those links in the show notes for people too. But Robbie, again, thank you so much for your time, sharing all your knowledge. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure everyone else has too.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you inviting me and having me on and letting me talk. It's something I do pretty well.
Cool.